In today's video, in our series on dogs and separation anxiety, we're going to talk about fixes that do work and why. We're going to discuss how to help a dog who suffers from separation anxiety. Hi, my name is Terry Hayward. I'm a professional dog trainer and behavior consultant, and I specialize in working with families whose dogs suffer from separation anxiety. The first thing that works is patience and consistency. This kind of sounds silly, but it is the key. There are no quick fixes. There's no way to determine ahead of time how long things are going to take. And that might sound like I'm not willing to talk about the timeline, but it just means that it depends on the individual dog. It's just like if you wanted to learn how to play a musical instrument and so did I, it might take you 3 months to learn how to play the violin, and it may take me a year. And so there's just no way to determine upfront how long the process is going to take. The second thing that does work is consulting your vet or a veterinary behaviorist plus a trainer. Vet plus trainer, meds plus behavior modification are generally the process that works towards relaxation. Again, medication in this instance allows us to gain traction on the behavior modification protocol. It allows us to set everyone up for success. It allows us to avoid repeating versions of the unwanted behavior where the dog displays behavior that indicates fear, anxiety, and stress, and instead allows us to get repetitions of the versions that we want where the dog is relaxed moving forward and start to build a long, strong reinforcement history for that scenario. What also works is a desensitization protocol. Desensitization means moving at a pace that your individual dog indicates that they feel comfortable with. And the way that we know that they feel comfortable with this process is via their observable body language. So over time, gaining fluency with interpreting that body language, this is where the help of a professional, especially at the beginning, comes in, can guide us in determining our criteria, whether we're going to stay status quo, push a little bit more, or if we need to pull back a bit on our protocol. And that leads to body language interpretation fluency. Gaining fluency on understanding how and what the dog is communicating again, can enable us to understand if we're ready to move forward, if the dog needs to stay where they are, or if they need to take a few steps back. We'd all love it if the plan went from A to B in a straight line. Unfortunately, it often goes something like this as we progress. Just like anytime we're learning something. For people too, you might have days that things go really well and days that feel like, wow, I feel like I've never ever done this before. But as long as we're making forward progress and the trajectory is positive, then we keep going and we consider that successful. Also, something that works and why it's important to work with a professional is making appropriate approximations. I mentioned in another video that saying something like leave for 5 minutes or leave for 10 minutes is often too much. It's often not desensitization, but is frequently flooding instead, which is the opposite of moving at a pace that the dog indicates they're comfortable. So we are frequently moving in such tiny micro increments at the start, but over time, those small moves eventually become sort of like compound interest. We might start moving with seconds, then those seconds become minutes, eventually those minutes become more minutes until we're able to move in bigger blocks of time. We might have someone out of the house eventually for 15 to 30 minutes or 30 to 60 minutes. But the beginning is really, really small approximations and feels the hardest and the heaviest because it may also take the longest as we're working to help the dog feel comfortable. We also want to set the dog up for success and understand why this is important. So we want to choose to do our training at a time when there's not trigger stacking going on, when the dog has met all of their biological needs. So they've had their breakfast, they've been outside to eliminate, they've maybe had a little bit of exercise, you've been home for a little while. Versus, for example, you flying in the house after work at 5, dog hasn't been out, hasn't had their meal, and you're sort of stressed too. That would not be setting everyone up for success. Also, something that works is adjacent positive reinforcement training to build confidence. With my clients, I work in packages that incorporate separation anxiety and then encompass sort of everything else, because separation anxiety is sort of its own animal. Having said that, it also can, however, be really helpful to have people working on other positive reinforcement training separately and adjacent to our Setbacks protocols. Things like teaching a dog to settle on a mat comfortably, teaching a dog to target, because this is a confidence building behavior. Overall, using positive reinforcement will help to build the relationship between the dog and the person in a good and positive way. The next thing that does help is data and appropriate expectations. So when I work with my clients, we keep information about what's going on. We track what's happening each time we work on our protocols, each time we do a session, each time our folks do a mission. We call the exercises that they do daily missions because it sounds less aversive to the humans than saying you have homework. Missions kind of makes it fun. And where it is rather boring, we are trying to infuse as much enthusiasm and excitement as possible into the process. We also want to have appropriate expectations and realize that this is a long process, that it may take as long as it takes, and that regressions might also be part of the process, which means that you might take a few steps back and then you might have a week or longer where you have to kind of reevaluate what's going on and take stock and look at our data and kind of reassess before moving forward again. Again, in terms of criteria, it's not always building. Sometimes we hit a plateau before we're able to continue on again. And having those realistic expectations at the onset is something that works for the overall protocol. And this, again, is why it is important to work with qualified professionals. Having a vet behaviorist, and/or a positive reinforcement trainer on your team can help you navigate what works towards leading to success with helping your dog feel more relaxed as a result of them suffering from separation anxiety. Thanks for watching, and stay tuned for our next video where we talk about what it looks like, recovery and long-term success.